Deep within the ancient northern forest, a discovery was about to change Ranger Cole Matthews' life forever. While tracking illegal hunters one misty autumn morning, he stumbled upon a narrow, overgrown trail marked with fresh footprints. Following it for nearly an hour, Cole emerged into a clearing where a dilapidated cabin stood, half reclaimed by the wilderness. Inside, dust swirled through his flashlight beam, revealing a moldy dinner table set for two, and walls lined with children's drawings, all depicting a tall figure in a ranger's hat. When Cole found a leather journal with his missing father's handwriting, the connection to his past became unmistakable. Could the forest have been hiding the truth about his father's disappearance for all these years? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Cole Matthews pulled his Forest Service truck into the small gravel lot outside Outpost 17, his home for the past 15 years. The two-story log structure stood alone among towering pines, a solitary outpost monitoring nearly 1,000 square miles of wilderness. Exhaustion weighed on him after what he'd found in that cabin. Another exciting day, saving the forest from itself. Diane's voice crackled through the radio as Cole stepped inside. Diane Cooper had dispatched for the northern sector longer than Cole had been a ranger. Her voice was often his only human contact for days at a stretch. Just the usual. Tourists leaving trash, couple of hikers off trail. Cole hesitated, the journal hidden inside his jacket suddenly feeling heavy. Anything come in about the Henderson permit? They're pushing those hunting boundaries again. Nothing yet. Jack wants your incident report by tomorrow, though. Cole nodded, though Diane couldn't see him. Jack Lawson, his supervisor and mentor, had been his father's partner decades ago. His father. Cole's hand unconsciously touched the journal. You okay, Cole? You sound off. Diane's concern cut through his thoughts. Fine, just tired. I'll check in tomorrow. Inside his quarters, Cole pulled the weathered family photo from his desk drawer. 3 smiling faces, himself at 10 years old, his mother and his father in his ranger uniform. David Matthews had been the most respected ranger in the service, until he vanished without a trace. Cole's mother had died, believing David had abandoned them. The official report cited desertion, but Cole never believed it. His father had loved the forest, loved his job. The forest was in their blood. Now the faded photograph seemed to hold new questions in the eyes of his father. Cole carefully placed the journal beside it. His hands trembled slightly as he opened to the first entry, August 12, 1987, found unusual tracks near the North Ridge again. Too small for bear. Station says no children reported missing, but something's not right. Cole flipped through pages, seeing his father's neat handwriting grow increasingly erratic over time. September 3rd, I hear them at night now. Children's voices. No one believes me. The forest is changing. The final entries sent a chill down Cole's spine. October 17th, I know what's happening now. I can't leave them alone. God forgive me, but they need a guardian. The last dated entry, 3 days before his disappearance. October 24th. I've made my decision. Cole will understand someday. A knock at his door startled Cole. He quickly slid the journal under some papers. Jack Lawson filled the doorframe, his weathered face creased with concern. At 65, he should have retired years ago, but the forest held him just as it held Cole. You look like you've seen a ghost, Jack said, stepping inside. His eyes lingered momentarily on the family photo. Rough patrol? Cole considered telling Jack about the cabin, the journal. But something held him back, nothing special. Just tired. Jack studied him with the sharp eyes of a man who'd spent decades reading tracks and signs. We've got reports of unusual activity in the North Quadrant. Animals behaving strangely, some hikers claiming disorientation. Probably just early winter weather patterns, Cole replied too quickly. Jack's gaze narrowed. Your dad used to say the forest speaks to those who know how to listen. Before the end, he was hearing things too. Cole's heart quickened. What kind of things? He never got specific. Just said the deep forest was changing. Jack sighed. Listen, I know the anniversary's coming up. If you need time, I don't need time, Cole interrupted. I'm fine. After Jack left, Cole pulled out his father's old compass from the bedside drawer, his most treasured possession. The tarnished brass case still opened smoothly, revealing the face with its distinctive scratch across the northern quadrant. His father had claimed it was the most reliable compass ever made, except for that one section of forest where it always spun wildly, the same section where Cole had found the cabin. Cole set the compass on top of the journal and watched as the needle began to rotate slowly, without purpose or direction. Morning light filtered through the pines as Cole studied the incident board at the station. 6 reports in the last month. Hunters claiming equipment failure in the north sector, hikers reporting lost time, a family insisting their compass led them in circles for hours. Thinking harder won't make patterns appear, Jack said, setting a coffee mug beside Cole. These aren't random, Cole replied, tapping the northernmost pins. Everything's concentrated here, within a 5-mile radius. Same area your father was obsessed with. Jack's voice lowered. The county sheriff called. They're pushing back on our request for additional patrols. We have evidence of trespassers. Footprints and gut feelings aren't enough. They want something concrete before committing resources. Cole bit back his frustration. He'd spent the night reading his father's journal, connecting incidents from 15 years ago to current reports. There's a morning briefing in 10, Jack added, studying Cole carefully. You look like hell. Everything all right? Cole nodded, waiting until Jack left before pulling a small tape recorder from his pocket. He'd found it wrapped in his father's handkerchief, tucked in the back of his desk drawer, a place he hadn't checked in years. The device was old, the plastic yellowed, with a microcassette still inside. Cole had played it 3 times already, but he pressed play again, turning the volume low. Static crackled, then his father's voice emerged. Strained and whispering, October 19th, 1987. I'm leaving this in case I don't come back. The forest has been taking children for generations. I've seen them, heard them. They're not exactly alive anymore, but not gone either. There's something ancient here, something that feeds on innocence. I've tracked the pattern through old records. Every 30 years, children go missing. Rangers reported strange sounds, lights. Animals avoid the area. It's happening again. A long pause, then, I've found a way to stop it, but the price... His father's voice broke. Cole, if you ever hear this, no, I didn't abandon you. I made a choice to protect others. The cabin is the doorway. The forest requires a guardian. The recording ended with sounds of wind through trees, and what might have been children laughing distantly. A knock interrupted Cole's thoughts. Dr. Eleanor Morrison stood in the doorway, clutching a folder thick with papers. Dark circles under her eyes matched his own. Your secretary said I'd find you here, she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. I've got something you need to see. Cole quickly pocketed the recorder. Dr. Morrison didn't expect the Wildlife Service to send someone so quickly. Elena, please. She unfolded a large topographical map across his desk. Red markers dotted the northern quadrant. These show anomalous wildlife behavior over the past 6 months. Migration patterns disrupted, predators abandoning territories, prey animals gathering in unusual concentrations. Cole studied the map, a chill spreading through him as he recognized the pattern. A rough circle with a familiar clearing at its center. Where he'd found the cabin. Animals are avoiding this area completely, Elena continued, pointing to the center. It's as if they sense something we can't. What brought the Wildlife Service into this? Cole asked, careful to keep his voice neutral. Elena hesitated. Officially, potential environmental contamination. Unofficially... She pulled out a thin file with classified stamped across it. I'm also with the Environmental Anomaly Research Division. We investigate phenomena that don't have conventional explanations. She slid an old photograph across the desk, a Forest Service team from the 1980s. Cole instantly recognized his father standing at the end. Elena tapped another face. My uncle worked with your father. He told stories about this forest before he disappeared the same year as your father. Cole's pulse quickened. Why are you sharing this with me? Because whatever's happening is accelerating. Look at this. She pulled out a small glass vial containing what looked like black soil. This is from the center of the avoidance zone. It's normal soil chemically, but plants won't grow in it. Lab animals refused to touch it. She placed the vial on his desk. As it settled, the dark particles inside shifted, seeming to move against gravity, climbing the glass walls. "That's not possible," Cole whispered. 3 researchers who handled this soil reported the same nightmare, children calling from deep in the woods. Elena's eyes locked with his. "Sound familiar?" Cole felt the tape recorder heavy in his pocket. "What do you want from me?" "Access to the restricted areas, and honesty about what you know." Her expression softened. "I think our family histories are connected through this forest. I think whatever took them is waking up again." Dawn mist clung to the pines as Cole's truck bumped along the service road. In the passenger seat, Elena studied her GPS unit with growing frustration. "This doesn't make sense," she muttered. "According to satellite data, we should be seeing a clearing half a mile ahead, but all I'm getting is dense forest." Cole gripped the steering wheel tighter. He'd told Elena about the cabin, sharing selected details from his father's journal, but kept the tape recording to himself. Some instinct warned him to hold something back. "Technology gets glitchy out here," he said, pulling to a stop where the road ended. "From here we go on foot." They loaded their packs, supplies for 3 days, though Cole had told Jack they'd be back by nightfall. Elena carried scientific equipment. Cole brought heavier gear, including an axe that had belonged to his father. "You're sure you can find it again?" Elena asked, shouldering her pack. Cole nodded, though certainty had been slipping away since sunrise. The forest looked different, older, the trees closer together than he remembered. "I marked the trail," he said, leading them into the woods. The fallen pine he'd notched as a landmark should have been 20 yards in. It wasn't there. 2 hours later, sweat soaked through Cole's uniform, despite the October chill. None of his markers remained, not the notched trees, the rock formation, or the distinctive lightning-struck pine that had guided him before. "We've been walking in circles," Eleanor said, checking her compass for the 10th time. The needle spun lazily, refusing to settle. "No," Cole insisted. "I know these woods. We're heading northeast." "The sun says we're going south," Elena countered, pointing upward through a rare break in the canopy. Cole stopped, disoriented. She was right. Somehow they'd turned completely around. "Let's try something," Elena suggested, pulling a strange device from her pack. It resembled an old radio, with extra dials and a copper wire extending from the top. "It measures electromagnetic anomalies. My uncle designed it." She switched it on. A soft whirring filled the air, followed by an intermittent clicking that quickened as she turned slowly in place. The clicks became a steady tone when she pointed west. "That way," she said. "Something's generating a field strong enough to disrupt compasses." Cole hesitated, then nodded. "Lead on." The device guided them through increasingly dense forest. The trees here seemed wrong. Too gnarled, too old for a forest that had been partially logged 30 years ago. Moss grew thicker, light dimmed, and temperature dropped noticeably. After another hour, Elena stopped abruptly. "We're close. The readings are off the charts." Cole pushed past a wall of ferns and found himself at the edge of a small clearing. The cabin stood before them, looking significantly more decayed than days before. The roof sagged dangerously, the porch steps had collapsed, and dark vines crawled up the north wall. "That's impossible," Cole whispered. "It wasn't this deteriorated." Elena stared at the structure, her scientific detachment momentarily shaken. Time might flow differently here. As they approached, Cole noticed something lying on the broken porch steps, a small wooden object, intricately carved. He picked it up carefully. It was a whistle shaped like a bird, crafted from dark wood that felt unnaturally warm to the touch. Tiny symbols were etched along its surface, similar to those in his father's journal. "What is it?" Elena asked, not reaching to touch it. "I don't know," Cole replied. "It wasn't here before." He turned the whistle over, revealing initials carved into the bottom. DM, his father's initials. The wood felt increasingly warm in his palm, almost alive. "This was my father's," he said quietly. "May I?" Elena held out her hand. When Cole passed her the whistle, she frowned. "It's cold." "What?" "No, it's—" He touched it again. Warm, almost hot now. Elena's monitoring device suddenly emitted a piercing whine. She dropped it in surprise, and it shattered against a rock, the noise cutting off abruptly. In the silence that followed, Cole heard it. Faint, but unmistakable. "Children laughing. Did you hear that?" he asked, scanning the trees. Elena shook her head, but her expression had tightened with fear. Cole raised the whistle, examining the mouthpiece. "I think it's meant to be played." "Cole, don't," Elena began, but something compelled him forward. He brought the whistle to his lips and blew softly. No sound emerged, at least none that Cole could hear, but the effect was immediate. The forest went completely silent. No birds, no insects, not even the sound of wind in the leaves. The cabin door, previously hanging from one hinge, slowly swung open. The cabin's interior was bathed in an unnatural twilight. Dust motes floating in the thin shafts of light that penetrated the boarded windows. Cole stepped inside first, flashlights sweeping across warped floorboards and crumbling furniture. "The place feels occupied," Elena whispered, staying close behind him. Cole nodded, throat tight. Everything was exactly as he'd found it days ago. The moldy plates on the table, the children's drawings on the walls, yet somehow more defined, as if the cabin were becoming more real. "There," he said, directing his light toward the stone fireplace. His father's journal still lay open on the mantel. As Cole reached for it, Elena called from across the room. "Cole, look at this." She stood before the wall of children's drawings, carefully removing one from its rusty nail. Unlike the others, this picture wasn't faded. The colors were vivid. A child's rendering of the cabin, a tall figure in a ranger's hat, and several small figures holding hands in a circle around him. In the trees lurked a darker shape, elongated and watchful. "The date," Elena said, pointing to the corner, "October 21st, 2025. Yesterday's date." "That's not possible," Cole whispered. Elena's scientific reserve cracked slightly. "Either someone's been here very recently or time works differently here," Cole finished. They methodically searched the cabin's main floor. Cole found his father's old service revolver wrapped in oilcloth beneath the sink. Elena discovered a collection of old photographs tucked into a book. Children from different eras, all standing before the same cabin, though it appeared newer or older in each image. "Some of these look like they're from the 1950s, she said. "Others might be from the 1920s. My father's journal mentioned a 30-year cycle," Cole replied. Examining the kitchen area, the floorboards beneath the old stove were discolored, as if frequently scrubbed clean. Cole knelt, running his fingers along the seams. One board moved slightly under pressure. "Help me with this," he called to Elena. Together they pried up the board, revealing a small, hollow space. Inside lay a child's music box, ornately carved with forest scenes. Unlike everything else in the cabin, it appeared pristine, untouched by time or decay. Cole carefully lifted it out. The polished cherry wood gleamed in the dim light, incongruously beautiful amid the cabin's decay. Tiny figures were carved around its edges, children dancing in a circle around a central tree. "Should you open it?" Elena asked, her voice hushed. Cole hesitated, then slowly lifted the lid. A haunting melody began to play, a simple, melancholy tune that seemed vaguely familiar. Inside, a miniature carving of a ranger rotated slowly, arms outstretched as tiny carved children circled him. The music affected them differently. Elena stepped back, covering her ears, though the volume was low. Cole felt a strange calm, almost a recognition. "I know this song," he said. "My father used to hum it." As the tune continued, the cabin seemed to respond. The air grew colder. The faded drawings on the walls rustled, though no breeze blew. From somewhere beneath them came a soft thump, like a door closing. Elena recovered her composure, scientists' curiosity overtaking fear. There must be a lower level. Cole closed the music box, but the melody lingered in the silence. He moved to the threadbare rug in the center of the main room, pulling it aside to reveal a trapdoor with a rusted iron ring. My father's journal mentioned a basement, he said. This must be it. It took both of them to lift the heavy door. Stale air rushed upward, carrying the scent of damp earth and something else, a sweet, cloying smell Cole couldn't identify. Stone steps descended into darkness. Cole's flashlight beam seemed to penetrate only a few feet before being swallowed by the blackness below. We should document everything, Elena said, removing a small camera from her pack. No one would believe this without evidence, Cole nodded, though doubt nagged at him. Would any photos taken here develop normally? Would anyone else even be able to find this place if they tried to return with others? I'll go first, he said, testing the top step with his weight. It held firm. Elena gripped his arm suddenly. Listen. From below came the faintest sound, a child humming the same melody as the music box. We're not alone, Cole whispered. Elena's scientific detachment wavered again. Maybe we should come back with more people, Cole shook his head. We might never find this place again. He paused, meeting her eyes. But you don't have to come down there. She squared her shoulders. We do this together. Cole descended first, counting the steps. 13. An unlucky number. The basement opened into a larger space than the cabin above suggested, the ceiling low enough that Cole had to duck his head. His flashlight revealed what looked like a children's dormitory. Small beds lined one wall. A table with miniature chairs stood in the center. Toys from different eras were scattered about, a wooden horse from perhaps the 1930s, a plastic action figure from the 1980s, a handheld game device from the early 2000s. Oh my God, Elena breathed as her light joined his, illuminating the far wall. Hundreds of names were carved into the wood, each with a date beside it. The earliest Cole could see was from 1886, the most recent from 1987. The year his father disappeared. Wind howled around the cabin as darkness fell, bringing with it a storm that hadn't been in any forecast. Rain lashed against the warped windows, and branches clawed at the roof like desperate fingers. The radio's useless, Elena said, adjusting dials on her emergency transmitter. Static hissed back, occasionally broken by what sounded like whispered voices. We can't call for backup. Cole nodded grimly, arranging lanterns around the cabin's main room. They'd spent hours documenting the basement, photographing the children's belongings, recording the names on the wall, searching for additional clues. Elena had found newspaper clippings about missing children dating back decades, all disappearing from nearby towns during the same 30-year cycles his father had noted. We need to leave at first light, Cole said. Jack will send someone if we don't check in by noon tomorrow. Will they find this place? Elena asked quietly. Cole had no answer. The forest had already proven it could hide the cabin, rearrange trails, disorient even experienced rangers. A powerful gust rattled the structure, and the temperature plummeted. Their breath fogged in the suddenly frigid air. The lantern flames dimmed, flickering as if starved for oxygen. Something's changing, Eleanor whispered, moving closer to Cole. From the basement came a soft thud, like a small foot on the bottom step. Cole drew his service pistol and approached the open trap door, aiming his flashlight into the darkness below. Hello? Is someone there? Only silence answered. We should close it, Elena suggested, her scientific demeanor giving way to instinctive fear. Together they lowered the heavy trapdoor. Cole dragged a chair on top, then added the small table for good measure. We'll take watches, he decided. 4 hours each. I'll go first. Elena looked ready to argue but nodded, setting up her sleeping bag as far from the basement door as possible. She removed a small device from her pack, an audio recorder with thermal imaging capabilities. State-of-the-art, she explained, setting it on the mantel. It'll document any anomalies while we sleep. Cole checked his watch. 8:17 p.m. I'll wake you at midnight. Elena settled into her sleeping bag but remained tense, eyes darting toward every creak and groan of the cabin. Finally, exhaustion claimed her. Cole sat by the window, watching rain pound against glass so warped it distorted the world outside. His father's journal lay open in his lap. The most recent entries described hearing children at night, seeing shapes moving at the edge of vision. A soft rustling drew his attention. In the corner farthest from the fire, shadows seemed to gather, thicker than natural darkness. Cole stared, straining his eyes. The darkness swirled, almost forming a shape before dissolving again. He reached for his tactical flashlight, the powerful beam cutting through the gloom. Nothing there. Returning to his post, Cole felt something hard in his jacket pocket. He'd forgotten about the small object he'd found wedged between the basement wall and floor. A child's toy soldier, hand-carved from dark wood, similar to the whistle but older, worn smooth by countless small hands. The soldier was unusual, not depicting a modern military figure but something older. The uniform resembled those from the late 1800s, when this area was first settled. Most strikingly, the face had been carefully carved to resemble a ranger, complete with a tiny hat like the one Cole's father had worn. As Cole turned it over in his hand, examining the craftsmanship, the toy grew warm, just as the whistle had. Heat spread through his fingers, not unpleasant but insistent, as if trying to communicate. On impulse, Cole set the figure down on the windowsill, standing upright like a sentry. "Watch over us," he murmured, half joking. Outside, the storm intensified. Lightning flashed, illuminating the clearing around the cabin for an instant. In that split second of brilliant light, Cole glimpsed small figures standing in a circle around the cabin, child-sized silhouettes, motionless in the downpour. Then darkness returned, leaving him blinking at after-images, heart pounding. Cole fumbled for his flashlight, shining it through the window. Nothing but rain and wind-whipped trees. Behind him, Elena mumbled in her sleep, face contorted as if in the grip of a nightmare. "They're waiting," she whispered. "They're always waiting." Cole checked his watch again. 11:54 p.m. Almost time to wake Elena for her shift. He rubbed his eyes, fighting fatigue. When he looked back at the windowsill, the toy soldier had moved. Now it faced inward toward the room, its tiny carved eyes seeming to watch the trap door. Cole blinked hard, convincing himself he must have placed it that way originally. He reached to reposition it. The wooden figure was ice cold now, and as his fingers touched it, all the lanterns extinguished simultaneously. In the sudden darkness, Cole heard it clearly, the trapdoor scraping against the floor as it began to open, pushing the furniture aside with impossible strength. From below came the sound of small feet on stairs and children's voices whispering his name. "Cole! Cole Matthews! Like your father before you!" The toy soldier in his hand began to vibrate, as if trying to warn him. Elena's thermal recorder suddenly emitted a high-pitched alarm. The device's small screen illuminated the room with eerie green light, displaying dozens of child-sized heat signatures surrounding them. Yet to Cole's eyes, he and Elena remained alone in the cabin. Dawn arrived with unnatural slowness, grey light seeping reluctantly through the cabin windows. Cole and Elena had spent the remaining night hours back-to-back in the center of the room, surrounded by a circle of salt Elena had produced from her pack. Old superstition, but it might help, she'd explained with scientific embarrassment. The trapdoor had eventually slammed shut on its own. The temperature had normalized. By morning, Elena's thermal recorder showed no anomalous readings, though the night's data revealed dozens of cold spots moving in coordinated patterns throughout the cabin. "We need to leave now," Cole said, gathering their essential gear. Elena nodded, her academic curiosity tempered by the night's events. She carefully packed her recording equipment and the photographic evidence they'd collected. Cole pocketed his father's journal and the wooden soldier, which had returned to normal temperature. The whistle he hung around his neck on a leather cord, inexplicably certain he shouldn't leave it behind. Outside, the forest had transformed again. The storm had passed, but its impact remained. Trees stood closer to the cabin than before. Some bent at unnatural angles, as if straining to reach the structure. The clearing had shrunk considerably. "The forest is closing in," Elena observed, scientific detachment slipping back into place now that daylight had returned. "It's almost as if it's trying to reclaim the cabin." Cole checked his GPS unit. No signal. His compass spun uselessly. "We head south," he decided. "Downhill. We'll hit the service road eventually." They set off, pushing through underbrush that seemed to thicken with each step. Cole blazed their trail with his axe, marking trees as they passed. Elena documented their journey with her camera, capturing images of the increasingly unusual vegetation: ferns with unnatural spiral patterns, trees with bark growing in geometric designs. After an hour, Cole stopped abruptly. "We're going in circles." Before them stood a tree he'd marked 20 minutes earlier, the fresh axe cut unmistakable. Yet they'd maintained a straight course downhill. "That's not possible," Eleanor said, checking her altimeter. "We've descended nearly 300 feet. Cole scanned the area, a sense of being watched prickling his skin. "Let's try east." They altered course, moving perpendicular to their previous path. The forest grew older here, pines giving way to ancient oaks and maples that shouldn't thrive at this elevation. Moss covered everything, thick and vibrant despite the autumn season. Another hour passed. Cole's latest mark appeared ahead of them. "The forest is herding us," Elena said quietly. Like livestock. Cole felt a weight in his jacket pocket grow suddenly heavier. Reaching in, he pulled out a small object he hadn't placed there, a crude stone knife with a bone handle, ancient and worn but still sharp. Intricate symbols were etched into the blade, similar to those in his father's journal. "Where did that come from?" Elena asked, eyes wide. "I don't know," Cole admitted. "It wasn't there before." Elena reached for it cautiously, but pulled back before touching it. "There's something wrong about it." Cole turned the knife over, examining the symbols. One matched a drawing from the journal, a circle of small figures around a larger central form. As he studied it, a drop of blood appeared on his finger, though the blade hadn't cut him. The forest responded immediately. Wind rushed through the trees, carrying whispered voices. The ground trembled slightly. "Cole," Elena whispered, pointing ahead. A deer stood watching them, unnaturally still. Its eyes reflected no light, appearing as black pools. As they stared, more animals emerged from the trees: rabbits, foxes, a pair of wolves, all with the same obsidian eyes, all forming a loose circle around them. "Don't move," Cole breathed. The knife grew hot in his hand. The symbols beginning to glow with faint green light. Blood from Cole's finger ran down the blade, filling the etched lines. "It wants blood," Elena realized. "Some kind of offering or activation." The animals stepped closer, moving in uncanny unison. The deer lowered its antlers. The wolves bared their teeth. Acting on instinct, Cole raised the knife and sliced his palm, letting blood drip to the forest floor. "We mean no harm," he called out, feeling foolish yet desperate. "We're just trying to leave." The reaction was immediate. The animals retreated several paces, still watching but no longer advancing. From behind them came a sound like wood splitting. They turned to see a massive oak tree groaning as its trunk opened along a previously invisible seam, revealing a hollow space within. Inside the tree hung a ranger's jacket, faded green wool with brass buttons, at least 30 years old. Cole recognized it instantly from photographs. His father's service jacket perfectly preserved. The animal's attention shifted to the tree, then back to Cole, expectant. I think it's showing us the way out," Elena said uncertainly. Cole approached the tree, drawn by his father's jacket. As he reached for it, he noticed something tucked in the breast pocket, a folded map on weathered paper. "I don't like this," Eleanor said. "It feels like we're being manipulated." Cole unfolded the map with trembling hands. It showed the forest in meticulous detail, with the cabin at its center. A path was marked in what appeared to be dried blood, leading from their current location to the forest's edge. Scrawled across the bottom in his father's handwriting were 5 words: "Follow exactly. Don't look back." Cole studied his father's map intently, tracing the blood-marked path with his finger. The route wound through areas he'd never explored, despite 15 years patrolling these woods, sections marked on official Forest Service maps as geographical anomalies or simply left blank. "This can't be accurate," Elena said, looking over his shoulder. "According to this, we're miles deeper in the forest than physically possible." "Nothing is physically possible here anymore," Cole replied, carefully folding the map. He slipped his father's jacket on over his uniform. It fit perfectly, as if made for him. "We follow this exactly." As they prepared to leave, the animals with obsidian eyes melted back into the trees. The forest had grown unnervingly quiet. No birds, no insects, not even wind through the branches. They followed the map's path for hours, moving through increasingly primeval forest. Ancient trees towered above them, their massive trunks covered with moss and fungi Cole had never seen before. The air grew thick, almost misty, carrying the scent of earth and decay. "Check your watch," Elena said suddenly. Cole glanced down. The hands spun randomly, sometimes clockwise, sometimes counterclockwise. "Time doesn't work normally here either." Elena checked her satellite phone again. Still no signal. "We should have hit the boundary hours ago." "The entire forest is only 20 miles across at its widest." Cole consulted the map again. "We're halfway there, according to this." "Halfway where?" Elena questioned. "This doesn't match any topography I've studied." A rustling sound ahead stopped their conversation. Cole reached for his sidearm, but Elena gripped his arm, pointing to a small clearing ahead. An elderly woman stood watching them, her dark skin deeply wrinkled, long silver hair bound in intricate braids. She wore modern hiking clothes incongruously paired with what appeared to be traditional, indigenous jewelry, a bone breastplate and multiple necklaces of stone. "Wood and teeth, I've been waiting for you." "Ranger Matthews," she called, her voice stronger than her apparent age suggested. "You're walking your father's path." Cole approached cautiously. "Who are you?" "My name is Sarah Redfeather. I'm the last keeper of the old stories for my tribe." She gestured toward a small camp she'd established in the clearing, a modern tent, camp stove, and several cases of scientific equipment. "I've been tracking the forest's expansion for 3 days." Elena stepped forward. "Expansion?" Sarah nodded grimly. "The boundaries are growing. What used to be a 5-mile anomaly has doubled in size this week." She studied Cole with penetrating eyes. "Ever since you found the cabin." "How do you know about that?" Cole demanded. "Because my grandfather was there when your father made his bargain," Sarah replied. She reached into her pack and removed a small wooden box, intricately carved with symbols matching those on the stone knife. "He left this for your father's son." Cole accepted the box, hesitantly. It vibrated slightly in his hands, like something alive. "What is it?" "A key and a prison." Sarah glanced skyward. "We should talk in my camp. Night comes quickly here and differently than outside." Inside her tent, Sarah produced a pot of strong-smelling tea. "Protection," she explained, pouring 3 cups. "The children can't cross where this is served." "Children?" Elena asked, accepting a steaming cup. "What remains of them?" Sarah clarified. "The taken ones." Cole placed his father's map and the wooden box on a small folding table. "You said your grandfather knew my father?" Sarah nodded. "My grandfather was tribal liaison with the Forest Service. In 1987, when children began disappearing, he recognized the pattern from our stories. The hunger had awoken again." She sipped her tea. "Our people avoided this place for generations. We called it Wendigo Forest, the place of the spirit that consumes innocence. A Wendigo." Elena's scientific skepticism warred with recent experiences. "The cannibalistic spirit from Algonquian folklore?" "Names don't matter," Sarah replied. "What matters is that every 30 years it hunts, takes children, feeds on their innocence, their potential, their futures." She looked at Cole. "Unless it has a guardian." Cole felt a chill. "My father, he made a bargain," Sarah confirmed. "Himself in exchange for the children already taken, and no more to be claimed until the next cycle." She touched the wooden box. This contains the original bargain made between my ancestors and the spirit hundreds of years ago. The terms by which it can be bound. Cole carefully opened the box. Inside lay a braided bracelet made from human hair of different colors, threaded with tiny carved beads and bound with what appeared to be dried sinew. Despite its obvious age, it seemed perfectly preserved. A binding cord, Sarah explained. Hairs freely given by parents of taken children, beads carved from the trees of the spirit's domain, sinew from a Wendigo's previous form. Previous form? Elena asked. The spirit takes human guardians who volunteer, Sarah said gravely. Over time, they change, become something else. Your father has been guardian for nearly 30 years. The transformation will be nearly complete. Cole stared at the bracelet. So my father is becoming this Wendigo? No, the spirit already exists. Your father is becoming its vessel, its voice. Sarah looked at him with sympathy. Soon nothing of David Matthews will remain. Cole's hand tightened around the bracelet. Unless a new guardian takes his place, Sarah said quietly. Or unless the spirit is banished permanently. How? Cole demanded. That knowledge was lost, Sarah admitted. Or hidden. My grandfather believed the answer lay in the cabin, in the place where worlds overlap. Elena leaned forward. Are you saying the cabin exists in multiple dimensions? It exists where the spirit exists, Sarah replied. In the in-between, Cole studied the bracelet. This will lead us back to the cabin. Sarah nodded. Wear it and the spirit will recognize your bloodline. It will allow you passage. Her expression grew solemn. But be warned, it will test you. The spirit wants a new guardian. It will try to convince you that you belong there, just as it convinced your father. Why help us? Elena asked. Why not just warn people away? Sarah's face hardened. Because the spirit is breaking the original bargain. The boundary expands. Soon it will reach the town. More children will vanish. She fixed her gaze on Cole. It needs to be stopped or bound anew. And only a Matthews can do it now. Night fell with unnatural swiftness as Cole secured the braided bracelet around his wrist. The effect was immediate. A warm pulse traveled up his arm, and the forest around them shifted subtly, trees seeming to lean away rather than toward them. It recognizes your blood, Sarah observed. The way is open now. Elena checked her equipment one final time, her scientific curiosity evidently wrestling with fear. If this entity has existed for centuries, there must be records, studies. There are, Sarah interrupted. But those who look too deeply tend to disappear into the forest. She handed Cole a small leather pouch. Protective herbs. Keep them close. Cole nodded, tucking the pouch inside his father's jacket. How will we find the cabin again? You won't need to find it, Sarah said grimly. It will find you. With flashlights cutting through the gathering darkness, they set off, following the blood-marked path on the map. Sarah took the lead, moving with surprising agility for her age, occasionally stopping to mark trees with symbols using a piece of red ochre. Warnings for others, she explained, to stay away. The forest grew increasingly silent as they walked, the darkness between trees deepening beyond what their lights could penetrate. Occasionally, Cole glimpsed movement at the edge of visibility, small darting shapes that vanished when directly observed. After an hour, Sarah stopped abruptly, raising her hand for silence. Ahead, a soft glow emanated from between distant trees, warm, inviting, like lamplight through windows on a cold night. The cabin, Cole whispered. Sarah nodded. It's calling to you now. As they approached, the cabin appeared different again, less decayed, almost welcoming. Smoke curled from the chimney. Warm light spilled from windows that had been boarded up before. Cole felt a strange longing, an inexplicable sense of homecoming. The bracelet on his wrist pulsed in counterpoint as if warning him. It's showing what you want to see, Sarah cautioned. The bargain must be renewed tonight, on the 30th anniversary. It's preparing to welcome its new guardian. Elena consulted her instruments. The electromagnetic readings are off the charts. There's a dimensional variance unlike anything I've recorded. They paused at the edge of the clearing. The cabin door stood slightly ajar, golden light spilling across the porch. "I'll go first," Cole decided, drawing his sidearm despite doubting its usefulness. "Cole," Sarah said, her expression grave, "if you see your father, remember that after 30 years, very little of him remains. The entity speaks through him now." Cole nodded, throat tight. They approached cautiously. As Cole's foot touched the first porch step, an object rolled out from beneath, stopping against his boot. An old tin lunchbox, rusted at the edges but still intact. His breath caught. The faded Superman design was unmistakable. It had been his as a child. "What is it?" Elena asked, seeing his reaction. Cole picked up the lunchbox with trembling hands. "Mine, from when I was 8. I brought it when we'd visit my dad at work." He ran his fingers over a dent in one corner. "I haven't seen it since the day before he disappeared." Inside, he found a child's treasures. A small collection of pine cones, interesting rocks, a toy car, and a folded piece of paper. Cole carefully unfolded the yellowed sheet to reveal a child's drawing. Himself and his father, standing before a cabin, smiling stick figures holding hands. In the corner, in his childhood handwriting, "Me and Dad at his special place in the woods. I drew this," Cole whispered. "But I never visited any cabin with him." "False memory," Sarah suggested. "The entity plants them, creating connections, making you believe you belong here." But even as she spoke, fragments of memory surfaced in Cole's mind. His father carrying him along forest paths, a cabin much newer than this one, playing with other children while his father watched from the porch. "No," Cole said, certainty growing. "I was here. He brought me once." Elena studied the drawing with academic detachment. "The entity could be manipulating your memories, making you think." "I remember," Cole insisted, more images flooding back. "There were other children here. We played hide-and-seek in the woods. My father warned us never to go beyond the big lightning-struck pine." Sarah and Elena exchanged concerned glances. "Cole," Sarah said gently, "no children who came here ever left again." "According to all records, you never visited your father on duty." Cole stared at the lunchbox, doubt creeping in. The memories felt so real, yet something about them seemed wrong. The colors too vivid, the emotions too perfect. From inside the cabin came the soft notes of a familiar melody, the same tune from the music box. "It's calling to you," Sarah warned. "Creating what you need to see." Cole placed the lunchbox down carefully. "There's only one way to know the truth." He climbed the remaining steps and pushed the door open. Inside, the cabin had transformed completely. Gone was the decay, the dust, the sense of abandonment. A fire crackled in the hearth. The table was set for dinner, steam rising from fresh food. The children's drawings had been framed and hung with care. In a rocking chair by the fire sat a figure in a ranger's uniform, a face hidden in shadow. "Hello, son," said a voice Cole hadn't heard in 30 years. "I've been waiting for you to come home." The figure turned, firelight revealing a face that was almost his father's, the same strong jawline, the same kind eyes, but subtly wrong. The skin was too pale, the features too sharp. When he smiled, his teeth gleamed unnaturally white. "It's time," his father's voice continued, "for you to take my place." Cole stood frozen in the doorway, staring at the thing that both was and wasn't his father. Behind him, he felt Elena and Sarah's presence, though neither spoke. "You've grown," the figure said, rising from the rocking chair with unnatural grace. "A fine ranger, just as I hoped, Dad." Cole's voice caught, childhood longing warring with adult suspicion. The figure's smile widened slightly. "Part of me still is. Part of me is something else now." He gestured to the set table. "Please join me. There's so much to explain." Cole stepped further inside, drawn by an inexplicable pull. Elena followed, her scientific instruments silently recording, while Sarah remained in the doorway, one hand clutching a charm around her neck. "What happened to you?" Cole asked, studying the familiar yet wrong face. "I made a choice," his father replied, moving to the hearth where he adjusted a kettle hanging over the flames. "Children were disappearing. I found this place, discovered what was happening." He turned, his movements too fluid, almost predatory despite the calm demeanor. The forest has always been hungry, Cole. For centuries, it took children to feed its need for innocence and potential. The Wendigo spirit, Sarah said from the doorway. His father's gaze flicked toward her, something ancient and cold momentarily visible in his eyes. Names aren't important. What matters is the bargain I struck. He returned his attention to Cole. Myself in exchange for the children. I became its voice, its hands, its keeper, its prisoner. Elena observed quietly. Its partner, Cole's father corrected. I've lived 30 years in perfect communion with the forest. He gestured around the cabin. Time moves differently here. I've lived centuries in decades, learned secrets few humans could comprehend. From a shelf beside the fireplace, he removed an ornate wooden box, similar to the one Sarah had given them, but larger and more elaborately carved. He placed it on the table between them. My journal tells only the beginning, he said. This contains the rest. Cole approached cautiously. The box was carved with scenes depicting the forest's history, indigenous peoples making offerings at ancient trees, settlers building cabins, rangers patrolling on horseback, and children playing in clearings while tall. Elongated shadows watched from between trees. Open it, his father urged. Cole lifted the lid. Inside lay a crystal orb nestled in dark velvet, approximately the size of a baseball. Unlike the cabin's warm glow, the crystal emanated an eerie blue-white light that pulsed gently like a heartbeat. What is it? Cole whispered, feeling an odd resonance with the object. The heart of the forest, his father said reverently. The anchor that binds the spirit to this place. For 30 years, I've been its keeper. As Cole stared into the crystal's depths, images formed, children laughing, playing in sunlit woods. His father, younger, watching over them. The forest growing, breathing, alive with purpose. The children, Cole said, looking up. Where are they now? His father's expression softened with genuine sadness. They remain here between worlds. Neither alive nor dead. They're part of the forest now, safe in their own way. Trapped, Sarah corrected from the doorway. Consumed, preserved, Cole's father countered sharply. Without a guardian, the spirit would devour them completely. I've protected them, given them a kind of life. Elena moved closer to the crystal, scientific curiosity evident despite her caution. These readings suggest dimensional folding. The entity exists partially in our reality and partially elsewhere, Cole's father nodded. The cabin is a threshold. The crystal is the key. He looked directly at Cole. And the guardian is the gatekeeper. Why am I here? Cole asked, though he already suspected the answer. My time is ending, his father said. After 30 years, the human part of me is nearly gone. The bargain must be renewed, or the spirit will be free to take children again. He placed a hand on Cole's shoulder. It must be someone of my bloodline. It must be you. The crystal pulsed brighter, as if responding to his words. Inside its depths, Cole saw images of himself as a child visiting the cabin, playing with other children, while his father watched proudly. These memories, Cole said, are they real? Yes, his father affirmed. I brought you here once, when you were 8. I wanted you to understand, to prepare you for this moment. You knew even then. Cole asked, anger flaring, You plan to trap me here too? To prepare you for your destiny, his father corrected. The forest chose our family generations ago. Your grandfather felt its call, but resisted. I answered, Now it calls to you. From his pocket, Cole's father withdrew a folded paper, yellowed with age. He smoothed it open on the table, a deed to the land, dated 1886, granted to Jeremiah Matthews, Cole's great-great-grandfather. Our family has always been bound to this place, his father explained. The first rangers, the first guardians. Cole stared at the document, pieces falling into place. We weren't random victims, no, his father confirmed. Matthew's men have always heard the forest's call. Most ignored it. I answered because children were suffering. His expression hardened. As they will suffer again if you refuse. The crystal flared suddenly. Within its depths, Cole saw new images. The town nearest the forest, Children playing in yards and schoolyards, followed by shadows creeping closer, reaching for them with elongated fingers. "The boundary is already failing," his father said urgently. "Feel the bracelet on your wrist. It pulses with the heartbeat of the forest. It recognizes your blood." Cole felt it then, the rhythm of the bracelet matching the crystal's pulse, growing warmer against his skin. "You need to decide." "Son," his father said, his voice taking on an echoing, multi-layered quality that wasn't entirely human. "Will you take my place as guardian? Or will you leave the children to their fate?" The cabin grew eerily still, time seeming to suspend as Cole faced his father's transformed presence. The crystal orb pulsed between them, casting shadows that moved independently of their sources. "There must be another way," Cole said, stepping back from the table. "A way to end this cycle permanently." His father's expression darkened, something ancient flashing behind his eyes. "There is no other way. The forest has always been here. It will always be here." Elena moved cautiously to Cole's side, scientific detachment giving way to evident concern. "The readings from the crystal suggest it's not just a window, but a containment vessel. If the entity is bound to it, be silent," Cole's father commanded, his voice carrying unnatural harmonics that made the cabin's windows vibrate. He focused on Cole again, his features softening. "Son, I've protected the children for 30 years, given them a kind of peace. But my humanity is almost gone." From the doorway, Sarah spoke up. "Tell him the full truth, Spirit. Tell him what happens to the Guardian over time." Cole's father sighed, a sound like wind through winter bare branches. "The price is high. The Guardian's essence slowly merges with the forest itself. I am still your father, but I am also something more. What happens to the children?" Cole demanded. "The truth." A fleeting expression of shame crossed his father's face. "They remain, neither living nor dead. Their innocence sustains the forest." "Sustains you," Sarah corrected. "The spirit feeds on them slowly over decades. That's the true bargain, not their salvation, but their prolonged consumption." Cole's father didn't deny it. "It's a gentler fate than what awaits them without a guardian. The spirit unbound would devour them quickly, painfully." The crystal pulsed brighter, and children's laughter echoed through the cabin, though no children were visible. From the corners of his eyes, Cole caught glimpses of small shadows darting between furniture, gone when he looked directly. "Show yourself," he demanded of the air. "All of yourself." His father's form flickered like a television with poor reception. For a moment, Cole saw the truth. His father's body elongated, impossibly thin, skin stretched over an altered skeleton, fingers extended into talons, eyes entirely black and ancient. Then the human appearance reasserted itself, though less convincingly than before. "This is what awaits me if I agree," Cole asked, his voice steady despite his horror. "In time," his father acknowledged. "But you would protect the children. You would maintain the boundary." Elena had been scanning the cabin with her instruments during this exchange. Now she turned to Cole, excitement breaking through her fear. "The crystal's resonance pattern matches the electromagnetic anomalies throughout the forest. It's generating the dimensional fold." Sarah stepped further into the cabin, her protective charms clutched tightly. "My ancestors spoke of a prison made before written history. A cage of light to hold darkness." From her pack, she withdrew an ancient weathered hide scroll, carefully unrolling it on the edge of the table farthest from Cole's father. The hide was covered with pictographs, showing figures in a circle around a bright center, their hands linked. "The original binding," Sarah explained, pointing to symbols matching those in Cole's father's journal. "Not just a guardian, but a prison." Cole's father moved with unnatural speed, reaching for the scroll, but stopped abruptly at the cabin's threshold, as if hitting an invisible barrier. His features contorted with anger, the human disguise slipping again. "That knowledge was buried for a reason," he hissed. A voice now clearly not his father's alone, "because it offers an alternative," Sarah replied calmly. "A true binding, not just a delaying tactic." From her pocket she produced a small object wrapped in deerskin. Unwrapping it, revealed a crystal pendant, smaller than the orb, but clearly of the same material. glowing with the same pulsing light. "My grandfather took this from the cabin in 1987, Sarah explained. "A fragment of the heart, broken off centuries ago during an attempted binding." Cole stared at the pendant, feeling the bracelet on his wrist pulse in response to its presence. "What does it do?" "Alone, nothing," Sarah replied. "But united with the larger crystal by someone of guardian bloodline." She glanced at Cole's father, whose expression had become a mask of rage. "It could restore the original prison, the one created before your family's bargain began." "Lies," Cole's father spat, though he made no move to cross the threshold. "The children need a guardian, not a jailer. The forest requires communion, not imprisonment." The crystal orb on the table flared brilliantly in response to his anger. Within its depths, Cole saw new visions. The forest in flames, trees withering, the cabin collapsing. "It shows you what it fears," Elena observed. "What might happen if it loses control? Or what it wants you to fear," Sarah countered. "The spirit manipulates. It has always manipulated." Cole looked from the pendant to the orb to his father's increasingly inhuman face. "If there's a way to end this without another sacrifice, you would destroy centuries of balance," his father warned. "Release forces you cannot comprehend, or restore the original binding," Sarah said. "End the need for guardians and sacrifices." Cole's father lunged forward again, but remained trapped at the threshold, his form flickering between human and something else, taller, thinner, with too many joints and angles. The cabin groaned around them, the walls seeming to breathe. "Choose quickly," Elena urged, checking her instruments. "The dimensional boundaries are fluctuating. We might lose our chance to leave." Cole looked at his father, what remained of him, seeing both the man who had raised him and the ancient entity that now possessed him. "Dad, is there anything of you left that can help me?" For a moment, humanity flickered in his father's eyes. "Cole," he whispered, his true voice breaking through. "The price was worth it to save them. But I'm so tired." Tears of what looked like amber sap ran down his cheeks. "End it, please." The crystal orb pulsed frantically as if sensing betrayal. The shadows of children darted more frantically around the edges of the room, their whispers growing urgent, pleading. Cole reached for the pendant in Sarah's hand. As his fingers closed around it, the braided bracelet on his wrist burst into flame that didn't burn. The crystal orb on the table responded with a high-pitched tone that made the cabin windows crack. "Choose now," his father said, voice once again layered with the entities. "Guardian or destroyer, savior or abandoner. The children's fate rests with you." Cole clutched the crystal pendant, its light pulsing in rhythm with the larger orb. The cabin shuddered around them as if alive and in pain. Outside, the wind rose to a howl, tree branches scraping against the walls like desperate fingers. "How do we perform the binding?" Cole asked Sarah, raising his voice above the growing cacophony. "The scroll shows the ritual," she replied, pointing to the ancient hide. "A circle of willing participants around the heart. Blood freely given from the guardian's line. Words of binding from my people's tongue." Cole's father, or what remained of him, hissed from the threshold, his form increasingly unstable, flickering between human and monstrous. "You would trust ancient superstition over your own blood. I've held this boundary for 30 years, while she hid in her reservation, preserving dusty relics." "We need more people for a circle," Elena observed, studying the pictographs. "There are 5 figures shown here," Sarah nodded grimly. "Traditionally, 5 representatives of the 5 original tribes that first bound the spirit. We have 3, Cole said, looking between them. 3 is insufficient, his father said, a note of triumph in his multi-layered voice. The binding will fail. The backlash will destroy you all. Elena's scientific mind worked visibly behind her eyes. What about the children? Could they complete the circle? A ripple of what might have been fear passed across Cole's father's distorted features. The taken children, Sarah breathed, understanding dawning. They're still here, still partly human. If they chose to participate, they would never turn against their guardian. Cole's father snarled, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. Cole turned slowly, addressing the shadows that darted at the edges of his vision. "You've been listening. You've been watching. All these years." The cabin grew quiet, even the wind outside falling still. In the silence, Cole continued, "You were taken from your families, kept here between worlds." Small voices whispered from the corners, indistinct but present. The shadows stilled, seeming to listen. "My father tried to protect you," Cole acknowledged. "But you're still prisoners, still slowly consumed." He raised the pendant, its light illuminating the darkest corners. "Help us break this cycle. Help us set you free." His father lunged forward again, rage contorting his features, but the invisible barrier at the threshold held firm. "They are mine," he roared, his voice cracking the remaining windows. "I have nurtured them, preserved them." "You've fed on them," Cole countered calmly. "For 30 years. From his pack, Cole removed his father's journal, opening to the first pages. "Listen to my father's words, not the thing that wears his face now." He read aloud. "October 3rd, 1987. I've made a terrible bargain. God forgive me, but I saw no other choice. The children were suffering. At least now they'll have a guardian, someone to ease their passage as they're slowly consumed. I pray someday someone will find a better way." The shadows stirred more visibly now. In the dimness of the cabin's corners, Cole could almost make out small figures watching him. "There's a better way," he told them. "It'd help us restore the original binding." His father gave an inhuman shriek, his form elongating further, fingers extending into foot-long talons that scratched deep gouges in the cabin floor. "You know nothing of the original binding. It was cruel, painful. The Guardian's way is gentler." "For whom?" Sarah challenged. From her bag, Elena produced an unexpected item, a small handheld radio. She set it on the table and turned it on. Static hissed from the speaker, but as she adjusted the dial, fragments of children's voices emerged through the white noise. "I recorded this last night," she explained. "Enhanced and filtered the frequencies this morning while you slept." She looked at Cole. "They've been trying to communicate. Through the static, broken phrases became audible. 'Help us. Hurts all the time. Want to go home.'" Cole's father lunged at the radio, but the barrier held. His face contorted with a mixture of rage and what might have been shame. "You hear them," Cole said softly. "The real them, not what the entity wants us to hear." From his pocket, Cole withdrew the wooden toy soldier he'd found in the basement. He placed it beside the crystal orb. "I think I understand now. Each guardian leaves something of themselves behind, a connection to their humanity." He looked directly at the transformed thing that had been his father. "Dad, if you're still in there, we need your help one last time." For a moment the monstrous figure stilled, features shifting back toward human. "Cole," his father's voice emerged, strained but recognizable. "There's a box under the hearthstone. My badge." The entity reasserted control with a violent shudder, but Cole was already moving toward the fireplace. He pried up the central stone to reveal a small metal container. Inside lay his father's original Forest Service badge, tarnished but intact, unlike the modern plastic-backed badges. This was solid brass, with his father's name engraved on the back, "David Matthews, dedicated to the preservation of our natural heritage." As Cole lifted it, the badge grew warm in his hand, just as the wooden whistle and toy soldier had. He realized these objects retained connections to his father's humanity, preserved despite the entity's consumption of his essence. "The circle," Sarah urged, pointing to symbols on the scroll. "We need to form it now while the Guardian is weakened." Cole nodded, placing the badge beside the crystal pendant. "How do we call the children?" Elena raised the radio's volume, the static-filled voices growing slightly clearer. "They're already here. They're always here." "Then let's invite them properly," Cole said, reaching for the wooden whistle hanging around his neck. Cole raised the wooden whistle to his lips and blew. Unlike before, a clear, haunting note emerged, hanging in the air like mist. The cabin responded immediately, the temperature plummeting, frost forming on the inside of cracked windows despite the fire's warmth. His father's transformed figure convulsed at the threshold. clawing at the invisible barrier with elongated fingers. No, the voice no longer resembled anything human. They are mine. The shadows in the room's corners coalesced, taking more definite shapes, small, child-sized silhouettes that flickered like old film. They remained at the edges, hesitant, watching. "It's okay," Cole said softly. "We're trying to help." Eleanor's radio crackled with increased activity, fragments of children's voices becoming clearer. The whistle calls. "He sounds like the other one." Before the changing, Sarah consulted the hide scroll, her expression grave. "The ritual requires willing participation. They must choose to help." Cole blew the whistle again, a different note this time. Two distinct shadow children moved slightly closer, their forms becoming more defined, a boy and a girl, their clothing styles suggesting the 1980s. The girl's voice came through the radio more clearly than the others. "You look like him." "When he first came," Cole nodded. "He was my father. David Matthews, he was kind," the boy's voice added. "At first. He told us stories, brought us toys." A pause. "Then he started to change." Cole's father howled, the sound rattling the cabin's foundations. The entity was losing control, the human disguise slipping further. His limbs had elongated grotesquely, skin stretched tight over an altered frame, face barely recognizable. "The spirit is feeding on his final humanity," Sarah explained. "The transition is nearly complete." Cole approached the threshold cautiously, still clutching his father's badge. "Dad, can you hear me?" The monstrous figure stilled momentarily. Something flickered in the black pools of its eyes. Recognition, perhaps even regret. "Cole." The voice was barely his father's, but unmistakable. "I'm sorry. You were trying to protect them," Cole said softly. "Trying to protect you," his father replied, each word clearly requiring immense effort. "It wanted you even then. I took your place." Cole felt a cold realization settle over him. "The cabin. When I was 8. His father nodded, the movement jerky and unnatural. "It called to you first. Children recognize it more easily. You heard the voices in the trees." More shadow children had drawn closer, forming a loose semicircle behind Cole. Through the radio came whispers of confirmation. We all heard it, singing in the leaves, promises of forever games. "I made the bargain instead," his father continued, voice fading. "My life for yours." The entity reasserted control with a violent shudder, his father's brief lucidity submerged beneath its rage. "Enough sentimentality!" It snarled through his father's distorted mouth. "The Guardian path is the only path. A new Matthews must take the mantle." From her pack, Sarah removed a small clay bowl, adorned with symbols matching those on the scroll. She placed it on the floor between them and the threshold. "The binding requires blood freely given," she said, looking at Cole. "From the Guardian's bloodline." Cole nodded, understanding. He removed his folding knife from his pocket, but before he could open it, his father spoke again, his true voice breaking through one last time. "Son," he gasped, fighting visibly for control. "Use this." From within his ranger jacket, his father withdrew a tarnished silver object, a pocket watch that Cole instantly recognized. His grandfather's watch, passed down when Cole was born, disappeared when his father vanished. With tremendous effort, his father tossed it across the threshold. The watch skidded across the wooden floor, stopping at Cole's feet. Cole picked it up carefully. The case was warm to the touch, like the other objects connected to his father's humanity. The hands had stopped at 347, presumably the moment his father had made his original bargain. When Cole opened it, something fell into his palm, a small key of unusual design, crafted from the same material as the crystal orb and pendant. "The final piece," his father whispered, his form wavering like a candle flame in wind. "I kept it hidden, even from itself." The entity roared in fury, his father's body contorting in impossible ways as it fought to regain complete control. "Betrayer, after all I've given you," Cole examined the key. It was warm against his skin, pulsing in rhythm with both the crystal pendant and the larger orb. Tiny symbols matching those on the scroll were etched along its shaft. The original binding had a lock, Sarah realized, studying the scroll with new understanding. Not just a circle of power, but a key to seal it. Elena's scientific curiosity broke through her fear. A dimensional anchor point, she suggested. Something that stabilizes the prison between realities. The Shadow Children had moved closer still, almost distinct enough to make out features. The radio crackled with their overlapping voices. The first Guardian had it. Hidden when the bargain changed. He said you would come. Cole looked at his father, seeing both the monster he had become and the man who had sacrificed everything to protect his son. You planned this, he said softly. All these years, his father managed a final nod before the entity subsumed him completely, his body elongating to impossible proportions, fingers extending into foot-long talons, jaw unhinging to reveal rows of needle-like teeth. "The children are mine!" It shrieked, its true voice finally emerging, ancient, hungry, and terrified. Cole turned to the Shadow Children, now numbering at least a dozen, their forms growing more solid by the minute. "Will you help us? Will you complete the circle?" The boy and girl who had spoken first glided forward, their spectral hands reaching toward Cole. Through the radio, their voices came in unison. "We've waited so long for someone to ask." The cabin trembled as if in an earthquake, dishes rattling on shelves, furniture sliding across the warping floorboards. Outside, the forest roared with unnatural wind, trees bending almost double. The entity that had been Cole's father clawed at the threshold's invisible barrier with increasing desperation, leaving deep gouges in the wooden frame. "We need to hurry," Sarah urged, placing the clay bowl in the center of the room. "The binding must be completed before midnight, when the 30-year cycle ends." Cole checked his watch. 11:17 p.m. Less than an hour remained. Elena arranged 5 candles in a circle around the bowl, consulting the hide scroll. "The ritual requires 5 participants positioned at specific points," she said, scientific precision focusing her despite the chaos. North, south, east, west, and center. The Shadow Children had continued to materialize, now numbering more than 20. They formed a loose ring around the perimeter of the room, their features becoming increasingly distinct. Children from different eras, different backgrounds, all bearing the same hollow-eyed look of those trapped between worlds. "How do we choose which children participate?" Cole asked. The boy and girl who had spoken earlier drifted forward again, along with 2 others, an older boy wearing clothes from perhaps the 1950s, and a very young girl in a dress that might have been from the early 1900s. Through Elena's radio, the first boy's voice came clearly. "We were the first taken in each cycle. We remember the most." Cole nodded, understanding. He placed his father's badge, the wooden whistle, the toy soldier, and his grandfather's pocket watch at the cardinal points around the clay bowl. "The binding requires blood," Sarah reminded him softly. Cole opened his pocket knife and, without hesitation, cut his palm, allowing blood to drip into the bowl. "From the Guardian's bloodline," he acknowledged. As his blood touched the clay, a reaction began, the bowl emitting a soft blue glow similar to the crystal orb's light. The entity howled, throwing itself against the threshold barrier with renewed fury. "Blood remembers," Sarah murmured. "It calls to blood." The crystal pendant and key grew warmer in Cole's hand, their pulsing light synchronizing with the bowl's glow. He placed them beside the larger crystal orb on the table, all 3 now beating with the same rhythm. "What happens when we complete the ritual?" Cole asked. "To the children?" "To my father." Sarah's expression was grave. The original binding contained the entity fully, without need for a human vessel. "The children?" She hesitated. "The law suggests they would be released." "Released to where?" Elena pressed. "Another dimension?" "Oblivion." "Peace," came a whispered chorus from the Shadow Children. "Home," the entity roared, its form stretching and contorting beyond anything remotely human. "Lies, they will be destroyed." Only I preserve them. Cole looked at the terrified, hollow-eyed children, trapped for decades, some for over a century. Is that what you want? Release? They nodded in unison, their spectral forms flickering like candle flames. And my father? Cole asked Sarah. Her expression softened with sympathy. After 30 years as vessel, he is mostly gone. The ritual would separate what remains of him from the entity, but he wouldn't survive, Cole finished. He looked at the monstrous thing his father had become, seeing only traces of the man he'd known in its contorted features. From within his jacket, Cole removed a faded photograph, the last picture taken of his family together, a month before his father disappeared. He placed it carefully beside the ritual components, his final connection to who his father had been. This entity laughed, a terrible sound like breaking glass. Sentiment won't save him, nor will your pathetic ritual. The original binding required 5 full human participants, powerful shamans from 5 tribes. You have only 3 humans and 4 fractured souls. Sarah studied the scroll again, her expression troubled. It speaks of 5 souls in unity, freely joined. It doesn't specify living humans. It can't be that simple, Elena objected. The ritual descriptions suggest considerable power was needed. From the doorway of the cabin came a new voice. Jack Lawson, Cole's supervisor, standing there with a flashlight and a bewildered expression. Cole, what the hell is going on here? Everyone turned in surprise. Behind Jack stood Diane, the radio dispatcher, equally confused. How did you find this place? Cole asked, stunned. Followed your trail, Jack replied, staring at the transformed thing that had been Cole's father. My God, David! The entity shrieked in rage, recognizing Jack. The partner, the one who suspected. We came looking when you didn't check in, Jack explained to Cole, unable to tear his eyes from the monstrous figure. Got lost for hours until we heard that whistle sound. His gaze shifted to the shadow children, visible even to newcomers now. What are these? Children? The missing, Cole said simply. All of them. And that was my father. Now it's mostly the thing that took him. Understanding dawned in Jack's weathered face. He was trying to tell me before he disappeared. I didn't believe him. Diane stepped forward, her usual practical demeanor shaken but holding. We heard children crying. Followed the sound here. Sarah looked at the 5 candles, then at Cole. 5 humans. The ritual can be properly completed now. The entity howled in genuine fear for the first time, its form becoming even more distorted as it threw itself repeatedly against the threshold barrier. 5 humans and the trapped souls in agreement, Sarah continued. Exactly what the original binding required. Cole felt the weight of 30 years, his father's sacrifice, the children's suffering, the forest's hunger, all converging on this moment. He held up the crystal key. We're going to lock you away, he told the entity. Properly this time. No more guardians. No more sacrifices. The entity's rage transformed to desperate bargaining, its voice shifting to mimic his father's perfectly. Son, please, we can find another way. I can teach you to control it, to minimize the suffering. The forest needs a Matthews. It's our legacy, our purpose. Cole hesitated, the familiar voice cutting through his resolve. Dad! But the shadow children moved protectively around him. Their voices clear through the radio. Not him anymore. Tricks and lies. He wants you trapped too. Cole squared his shoulders and turned to Jack and Diane. I need your help. To end this. To free them all. Jack nodded without hesitation. Whatever you need. He looked at the twisted thing that had once been his partner. For David. On the table, the photograph of Cole's family began to glow with the same light as the crystals, an unexpected reaction that drew everyone's attention. Within the image, his father's face seemed to move, lips forming words Cole could somehow understand without hearing. Do it. Set us free, an artifact of his father's true self, preserved in the photograph's memory. The 5 candles flared to life simultaneously without being lit, their flames an unnatural blue that matched the glow of the crystal components. Sarah quickly positioned everyone around the circle, herself at the northern point, Elena east, Jack west, and Diane south. Cole stood at the center, holding the crystal orb with the pendant and key resting inside the clay bowl at his feet. "Midnight approaches," Sarah warned, consulting the hide scroll one final time. "We must complete the binding before the cycle renews." The entity that had once been Cole's father thrashed against the threshold barrier with increasing desperation, its form shifting constantly between his father's human appearance and something ancient and monstrous. The cabin trembled under the assault, windows shattering, floorboards splitting. "What do we do?" Cole asked, struggling to maintain his hold on the pulsing crystal orb. "Join hands," Sarah instructed. The power flows through connection. As they linked hands around the circle, the 4 shadow children who had volunteered positioned themselves between the humans, their spectral forms growing more solid where they overlapped with the blue candlelight. The other shadow children formed a secondary circle around them, watchful and expectant. Sarah began to chant, in her tribal language, ancient words that seemed to vibrate in the air. The entity howled in recognition, hurling itself against the barrier with renewed fury. "The words alone won't complete it," Sarah said between phrases. "The key must be joined with the heart at the moment of threshold crossing." Cole looked down at the crystal pieces, the orb in his hands representing the entity's heart, the pendant and key in the bowl symbolizing the original binding components. "How do I join them?" "Blood," Sarah replied. "Matthew's blood that speaks to both," the entity shrieked, its voice splintering into multiple tones. "No, the forest is ours. The children are mine." From the forest outside came an answering roar. Trees bending unnaturally, roots tearing free from soil, the entire woodland seeming to writhe in sympathy with the entity's rage. Through the shattered windows, Cole glimpsed darkness flowing between trees like liquid shadow, converging on the cabin. "It's calling the rest of itself," Elena observed, scientific calm remarkably intact. "The forest manifestation of the entity." Cole's watch read 11:52 p.m. 8 minutes remained. The shadow children began to flicker and fade, their connection to this reality weakening as the entity fought to reclaim them. Through Elena's radio came their urgent whispers. "Hurry! Can't hold much longer. It pulls us back." Cole set the crystal orb carefully in the bowl beside the pendant and key. Drawing his knife again, he sliced deeper into his palm, letting blood flow freely over all 3 crystal pieces. "I release you," he said to the entity, "from my family's blood, from your hunger, from this cycle." The reaction was immediate and violent. The crystals flared with blinding light. The entity convulsed, its form stretching impossibly before snapping back. The cabin walls bulged inward, as if under enormous pressure from outside. Sarah's chanting intensified, the others joining instinctively, though they didn't know the words. The shadow children's voices harmonized through the radio, creating an unearthly chorus that somehow complemented the chant. As Cole's blood covered the crystals, they began to merge, flowing together like liquid glass. The entity screamed, a sound of primal rage and fear that shattered the remaining windows and cracked the stone hearth. "The key," Sarah urged between chanted phrases. "It must lock the binding." But the merging crystals had formed a solid mass, with no visible keyhole or mechanism. Cole stared in confusion, time slipping away. From his pocket, the wooden whistle grew suddenly hot. Acting on instinct, Cole removed it and pressed it against the crystal mass. To his astonishment, the wood melded with the crystal, forming an intricate lock mechanism that perfectly matched the key's unusual design. "Of course," Elena breathed. "The whistle was calling to the children. It's connected to their imprisonment." The entity lunged forward one last time, the barrier at the threshold visibly weakening. "Son!" it called in his father's true voice, a final desperate deception. "Don't abandon me." Cole hesitated, the plea cutting through him despite knowing it was manipulation. In that moment of weakness, the barrier flickered, and one elongated hand thrust through, talons reaching for the crystal mass. Without thinking, Jack stepped forward, grabbing the entity's wrist. "Not this time," he growled. "You've had him long enough." The contact was catastrophic for Jack. Where the entity touched him, his skin blackened and withered. But he held firm, his expression resolute despite the obvious pain.
"Do it, Cole."
"For your father!" Cole grasped the key, aligning it with the lock that had formed. From within the entity's monstrous form, something shifted, a human face briefly visible beneath the horror, his father's eyes meeting his for one lucid moment. "Thank you," his father's voice whispered. Genuine this time, Cole turned the key. The world exploded in blue-white light. The crystal mass levitated from the bowl, expanding rapidly to form a translucent sphere that engulfed the entity. Jack was thrown backward, his arm badly burned but intact. The entity shrieked as it was pulled inexorably into the sphere, its form compressing, folding in upon itself. The cabin walls burst inward as the forest manifestation of the entity, living darkness flowing between trees, was similarly drawn toward the sphere, streams of shadow converging from all directions. Pulled into the crystal prison, at the moment of midnight, the sphere contracted violently to the size of a baseball, the entity now visible only as a dense, dark core at its center, sealed behind layer upon layer of crystalline barriers. The key, fully embedded in the structure, gave a final turn of its own accord. The lock engaged with an audible click that somehow echoed far longer than physically possible. The shadow children began to glow, their forms becoming distinct and clear for the first time. Real children from many different eras. Their faces peaceful now, free of the hollow-eyed emptiness. Through the radio came a chorus of thank you before the devices went silent. One by one, the children faded like morning mist, their expressions serene as they dissolved into points of light that drifted upward and vanished. All except one. The last remaining shadow solidified into a perfect likeness of Cole's father as a young man, dressed in his original ranger uniform, whole and human once more. In the sudden silence following the ritual's completion, the shadow form of David Matthews stood before his son, more solid than the other children had been, yet still translucent around the edges. He looked exactly as Cole remembered him from childhood, strong, kind-eyed, the embodiment of what a ranger should be. "Dad?" Cole whispered, afraid to move lest the apparition vanish. The shadow nodded, a smile forming on features unmarred by 30 years of servitude to the entity. When he spoke, his voice came not through Eleanor's radio but directly, though soft as a distant echo. "You did it, son. You broke the cycle." Cole stepped forward hesitantly. "Are you free now, like the others?" His father's expression turned complex, relief mingled with regret. "The children are free. They've moved on to whatever awaits beyond this life." He gestured to the crystalline sphere containing the entity, now resting quietly on the cabin floor. "And that is properly contained at last. But you're still here," Cole observed, hope rising. "Can you stay? Return somehow?" The shadow of David Matthews shook his head sadly. "I'm between. The entity consumed much of my essence over 30 years. What remains is tethered to this place." He looked around the cabin, which had begun to repair itself, broken windows reforming, splintered wood knitting back together. "The forest remembers its guardians." Elena approached cautiously, scientific curiosity evident despite her exhaustion. "You're part of the binding now, aren't you?" "The human element that keeps it stable." "Perceptive," David acknowledged. "The original binding required willing sacrifice, not servitude to the entity, but containment of it." His form flickered momentarily, growing less distinct before solidifying again. "I don't have much time in this form. The binding draws on what remains of my essence." Sarah studied the crystalline sphere, her expression troubled. The scroll mentioned a final requirement, a permanent anchor for the prison. David nodded grimly. "The binding is incomplete. Without an anchor, it will eventually weaken." He looked directly at Cole. "That's why I remained when the others passed on." "One last task." Cole felt cold dread settling in his stomach.
What kind of anchor?
A Matthews, his father replied softly. Not as guardian or vessel, but as watcher. Someone who maintains the boundary between worlds. Another sacrifice. Cole realized, his voice hollow. Not like before, David assured him. Not servitude or slow consumption, just connection. A living link of Matthew's blood who returns periodically to renew the binding. From the floor, Elena retrieved a small object that had appeared when the ritual completed. A silver ranger's whistle, similar to the wooden one but gleaming as if newly forged. Intricate symbols, matching those on the crystal prison, were etched into its surface. "This is the anchor," she said, understanding dawning. "A physical manifestation of the binding that remains in the human world." David nodded. "It must be carried by Matthew's blood kept in our family. And once each year, on the anniversary of the binding, it must be returned here. The cabin will remain?" Jack asked, cradling his injured arm where the entity had grabbed him. "The cabin exists at the boundary," David explained. "It will always be here for those who know how to find it." His gaze returned to Cole, a far lighter burden than what I carried. "A yearly visit, a simple renewal ritual, then return to your life." Cole studied the silver whistle in Elena's hand. "And if I refuse?" His father's expression grew solemn. "Then the binding weakens. Not immediately, but over time. Eventually it would fail completely, and the entity would be free again," Sarah finished. David nodded. "With no Matthew's guardian to contain it, it would consume indiscriminately. The boundary would collapse. The forest would expand, hunting for children without restriction." Cole felt the weight of family legacy pressing on him, not the corrupted bargain of guardianship, but the original purpose of protection and containment. "How long?" he asked. "How long does the binding last if renewed properly?" "Generations," his father replied. "Perhaps centuries with proper care." His form flickered again, becoming less substantial. "I'm fading, son. The binding draws me in to strengthen the walls of its prison." Cole stepped forward impulsively, reaching for his father, though he knew he couldn't touch him. "There has to be a way to free you completely." David shook his head, smiling sadly. "My choice was made 30 years ago, but it wasn't in vain." His gaze encompassed the room where the shadow children had been.
"They're free now."
"And you're safe." "That's all I wanted." The cabin shuddered suddenly, dust falling from the ceiling. Outside, the forest made a sound like a collective exhalation. "The boundary is stabilizing," Sarah observed. "But it needs its anchor soon." David's form had grown alarmingly transparent, visible now only in certain angles of light. "Choose, Cole. Accept the whistle and the duty it represents, or walk away. Your choice must be freely made, as mine was." Elena held out the silver whistle, its surface catching the moonlight now streaming through the repaired windows. Cole looked at his father's fading form, at the crystal prison containing the entity, at his colleagues watching him with varying expressions of concern and exhaustion. 30 years of questions, of loss, of wondering, all culminating in this moment of choice. From his pocket, he withdrew his father's badge, studying it one last time. The words engraved on the back seemed to take on new meaning, dedicated to the preservation of our natural heritage. The true Matthew's legacy. "I'll do it," Cole said, reaching for the silver whistle. "I'll be the anchor." As his fingers closed around the whistle, it grew warm against his palm. His father smiled, pride and relief evident in his increasingly transparent features. "Once a year," David reminded him, his voice fading to a whisper. "Return to renew the binding. The whistle will guide you." His father's form began to dissolve into motes of light, similar to how the children had departed, but somehow different, not rising upward, but flowing toward the crystal prison. "Dad!" Cole called, panic rising as his father's features became indistinct. "Will I see you again?" David's voice came one last time, barely audible. "I'll be watching over the forest, over you. Always." The last of his essence streamed into the crystal sphere, which pulsed once with brilliant light before settling into a steady, subtle glow. At its core, the dark shape of the entity remained contained, but now surrounded by a layer of softer, protective light. His father's final contribution to the binding, the silver whistle in Cole's hand, gave a single, clear note, though he hadn't blown it, as if acknowledging the completed connection. Dawn broke over the forest, sunlight filtering through branches that no longer seemed to reach with malevolent intent. Cole stood on the cabin porch, the silver whistle hanging from a chain around his neck, watching as the search and rescue team he'd radioed made their way carefully up the now visible trail. The forest had changed dramatically overnight. Where before it had been unnaturally dense and disorienting, it now felt normal. Old growth, certainly, and still carrying an air of ancient mystery, but no longer actively hostile. Birds sang from the branches. A deer and her fawn grazed peacefully at the clearing's edge. Behind him, Jack sat wrapped in an emergency blanket while Eleanor checked his burned arm. The injury was severe, but no longer carried the unnatural blackening from the entity's touch. Sarah had applied a poultice of herbs that seemed to be helping, though Jack would still need hospital treatment. "They'll be here in 10 minutes, Diane announced, lowering the radio. She glanced around the cabin's interior, her practical nature reasserting itself after the night's supernatural events. What exactly are we telling them? It was the question they'd all been avoiding. Cole touched the whistle at his neck, feeling its gentle warmth against his skin. "The truth wouldn't serve anyone," he said finally. "We say Jack was injured when part of the roof collapsed during the storm. We got lost, found shelter, waited for dawn, and the cabin." Elena asked, gesturing to the now perfectly intact structure that by all rights should have been torn apart by the night's events. "Abandoned hunter's cabin," Cole suggested. "Unmarked on Forest Service maps, but obviously old. Nothing unusual about it. Sarah had been packing her belongings, carefully wrapping the hide scroll for return to her tribe's keeping. The forest will help hide the truth," she said. "It always has. Those who don't need to find this place won't be able to, no matter how detailed the directions." Cole nodded, believing her. Already the events of the night were taking on a dreamlike quality, as if the normal world was reasserting its rules now that the boundary had been restored. From his pack, Cole removed his father's journal, studying the familiar handwriting. The later entries, which had grown increasingly erratic and disturbing, had somehow changed overnight. The words were the same, but the desperate tone had softened, replaced with a calm acceptance that hadn't been there before. The binding had altered more than just the forest. "What will you do with that?" Elena asked, nodding toward the crystal prison sphere now nestled in a specially padded compartment of Sarah's pack. "Take it to tribal lands," Sarah replied. "We have a sacred cave where such things have been kept before. It will be guarded, studied by those who understand." She looked at Cole. "The whistle is your responsibility. The sphere is ours." Cole nodded, understanding the wisdom in dividing the components of the binding. "And I'll return here every year on the anniversary," Sarah confirmed. "The renewal is simple. You'll know what to do when the time comes. The whistle will guide you." Jack stood shakily, testing his injured arm. "I've got 3 years until retirement," he said. "Until then, I'll make sure this section of forest remains restricted. Environmental research area ought to do it. And after you retire?" Cole asked. Jack smiled grimly. "I think I'll build a cabin nearby. Keep an eye on things." He glanced at the spot where the entity had manifested, his expression hardening. "For David and those kids." From outside came the sounds of the approaching rescue team, voices calling, radios crackling, the methodical progress of trained professionals through woodland. "One last thing," Elena said, removing something from her pack. She held out a digital recorder, different from the one she'd used during the night. "I've been documenting everything scientifically. Audio recordings, readings, photographs." Her expression was complicated. "It's the most significant paranormal evidence ever collected." Everyone tensed, understanding the implications of such documentation becoming public. Elena smiled faintly at their reaction. "And don't worry, I'm not publishing." She placed the recorder on the cabin's table. "Some knowledge isn't meant for general distribution. This stays here with the cabin. Part of the record." Cole felt profound relief and gratitude. "Thank you." As the rescue team's voices grew closer, Cole stepped back inside the cabin one final time. On the mantelpiece, something caught his eye that hadn't been there before. A framed photograph he didn't recognize. The picture showed his father as a young ranger, standing proudly before this very cabin. Beside him stood a boy of about 8. Cole himself, he realized with a shock, holding his Superman lunchbox and grinning widely. The cabin in the photo looked well-maintained, welcoming, its windows bright with light. Cole picked up the frame, stunned. This photo couldn't exist, yet here it was, solid and real in his hands, the paper aged appropriately for a 30-year-old photograph. A gift, Sarah said softly, noticing his discovery. The forest gives as well as takes. A true memory restored. As Cole stared at the image, fragments of recollection surfaced, a single perfect day with his father in this clearing, before the entity, before the bargain. His father showing him the cabin, telling him stories of rangers past, promising they'd return again someday. The whistle at his neck warmed slightly, as if acknowledging the memory. Cole carefully tucked the photograph into his jacket. Next to his father's badge and journal, 3 fragments of a family legacy, now transformed. Outside, the rescue team broke through into the clearing, their calls becoming more urgent as they spotted the cabin. "Time to go," Jack said from the doorway. Cole nodded, taking one last look around the cabin's interior. "I'll be back," he promised quietly. Something in the air seemed to shift in acknowledgement, and for just a moment, he thought he caught a glimpse of his father standing by the hearth, smiling slightly. Before the image faded like morning mist, Cole stepped outside into the sunlight, ready to return to the world beyond the forest. 1 year later, autumn leaves crunched beneath Cole's boots as he followed the narrow trail to the cabin. The path, once hidden and shifting, now remained stable, though still discoverable only by those who knew where to look. Jack had fulfilled his promise, designating the area a restricted research zone, accessible only with special permits that he carefully controlled. The silver whistle around Cole's neck had grown progressively warmer as the anniversary approached, subtly reminding him of his obligation. Not that he needed reminding. The events of that night had altered him as profoundly as they had the forest. Cole paused at the edge of the clearing, taking in the cabin's appearance. Though still ancient, it no longer seemed decrepit. Moss grew in patterns that somehow enhanced rather than degraded the structure. Wildflowers bloomed around the porch despite the lateness of the season. A thin trail of smoke rose from the chimney. Someone was waiting. Inside, he found Sarah tending a small fire, her silver-braided hair catching the light. On the table sat a collection of items for the renewal ritual: candles, herbs, a clay bowl similar to the one they'd used a year before. "You came," she said. "Unsurprised, I promised," Cole replied simply. She nodded approvingly. "The others will arrive by sundown." Elena had continued her research into dimensional phenomena, developing theories that carefully avoided directly referencing the forest entity, but advanced scientific understanding nonetheless. Jack, despite his injury, had remained a supervisor, protecting the forest with newfound dedication. Diane had become an unexpected ally, using her position as dispatcher to monitor for any unusual reports from the area. They gathered as dusk fell, forming the same circle as before. The ritual was indeed simpler than the original binding, a renewal rather than a creation. Cole's blood mixed with sacred herbs, the silver whistle laid in the center, words spoken in an ancient tongue that somehow felt familiar on his lips despite never having learned them. As moonrise bathed the cabin in silver light, the whistle rose from the bowl, hovering momentarily before settling back into Cole's palm. Noticeably warmer and faintly luminous, the binding was renewed for another year. Afterward they shared a simple meal, speaking of ordinary things, carefully dancing around the extraordinary truth they all shared. Some burdens were lighter when carried together. When the others had gone, Cole remained, feeling a need for solitude in this place where everything had changed. He sat on the porch steps, watching fireflies dance at the forest's edge, natural lights, not the ghost children of before. From his pocket, He removed a small leather-bound book, a new journal he'd started after finding his father's. In it, he recorded observations about the forest's healing, notes on the whistle's subtle changes throughout the year, and memories of his father as they continued to resurface as he wrote by lantern light. Something caught his attention, a glimmer in the tree line that wasn't a firefly. Standing, Cole watched as a translucent figure emerged slightly from the forest depths. His father, still recognizable though more a part of the woods now, his form seeming to be composed of moonlight filtering through leaves. They didn't speak. Words weren't necessary. The forest itself communicated their shared understanding. Guardian and anchor, father and son, legacy transformed but unbroken. The apparition faded as gently as it had appeared, leaving Cole with a sense of peace rather than loss. His father remained, watching over the forest in a new form, neither trapped nor fully gone. Inside the cabin, Cole prepared for his night's stay before tomorrow's return to his regular duties. From his pack, he removed a small wooden box he'd crafted himself, inlaid with symbols matching those on the whistle. Inside nestled a collection of items, his father's badge, the toy soldier, a fragment of the wooden whistle, a small vial of soil from the circle where the ghost children had played. Cole added a new item, a carved wooden figurine of two rangers, father and son, standing back to back as guardians. He'd spent months working on it, infusing it with meaning and memory. The box served as both record and reminder, not just of what had happened in the cabin, but of the responsibility that came with it. Someday, he would pass this knowledge to another of Matthew's blood, not as a burden or bargain with an entity, but as a sacred trust, a protection freely given. For now, though, the duty was his alone. Cole closed the box and placed it on the mantel beside the mysterious photograph from a year before. Together, these artifacts told the true story that official records never would, of sacrifice and salvation, of family bonds stronger than supernatural hunger, of a forest healed and a cycle broken. Outside, an owl called into the night. The sound was entirely natural, carrying no hidden whispers or hungry intent. Just a wild creature in its element, part of a woodland, finding its way back to proper balance. Cole stepped onto the porch one last time before sleep, looking up at stars clearly visible through healthy branches. The silver whistle hummed softly against his chest, a reminder of connection rather than imprisonment. "Good night, Dad," he said to the watching forest. "See you next year." A warm breeze rustled the autumn leaves in what might have been response. The forest remembered. It would always remember, but now it remembered rightly, with balance restored and ancient bargains rewritten into something healing rather than consuming. Cole Matthews, ranger and anchor, guardian but not prisoner, smiled into the darkness and went inside to rest.